Hi, I am Nitin Kumar. Welcome you on the IQ Civils online platform. I am a faculty of Polity, IR, Governance, PHIR, optional, and side by side taking classes for the current affairs also. So today what we are going to discuss about is polity, and the very first chapter I am taking up is a introduction to the Constitution. Let's see. So as far as the polity is concerned, it is in the GS paper second, and it is equally important for the prelims examination and mains examination. As far as the prelims examination is concerned, 10 to 12 questions you can expect from this side, from the polity side, and in 2018 we have around 18 to 19 questions from this polity, and in the mains examination you can expect around 9 questions to 10 questions there. So as far as the prelims is concerned and the mains is concerned, you have to understand the basic distinction between the questions related to the prelims and mains. In the prelims examination, what is important is the Constitution. You have to go into the depth study of the Constitution related to this examination, and once you go for the mains examination, besides this Constitution, what you have to read, the political system, what is going on in and around you, and at last the current affairs also, because there are plethora of issues right from the judiciary to the governance which is related to the polity part. And now let us start with the Constitution. You have to understand what is Constitution at first. Constitution is a fundamental law of any country. It is an organic law of any country. So what does it mean once we say it is a fundamental law? It means that whenever we are enacting any other law, we have to take care of this fundamental law, better known as the Constitution. So any law enacted by Parliament has to be in accordance with the fundamental law, that is the Constitution. And it is organic. What does organic means? So it has to change according to the times, the requirement of the time, by the way. So it is the most important law of any nation. Now, so next point, it means any other law, customs, conventions has to be consistent with our fundamental law, that is the Constitution. So let's take the example of the Sabrimala issue, and as you know, women in the menstrual age of 10 to 15 are not allowed into the sanctum sanctorum of the Sabrimala temple, okay, because the Lord Ayappa is supposed to be the god of celibacy, so it leads to the impurity. That was the belief, and that is the belief right now, okay, but somehow it is infringing the right of the women in the age of 10 to 50. So ultimately the Supreme Court pronounced that it is not inconsistent with the fundamental law, that is the Constitution, and the fundamental rights of Article 15. So ultimately it was declared null and void, and right now the review petition is going on, but let's see how the situation unfolds when the Supreme Court is going to pronounce its final verdict. So it has to be inconsistent according to the time. Okay, in the 1970s, actually live-in relationship was not allowed, and right now even the offspring of those parents who are in the living relationship used to get the inheritance right according to the Supreme Court. So the supreme law has to be inconsistent with the time, okay. You can take the case of the triple talaq also. So there are n number of examples related to it, that it has to change according to time, otherwise the Constitution is going to crumble. Now, so it is a supreme law of any country. It means it is a living one. So what does living one means? Okay, it has to change, it has to adapt, it has to be flexible, and the Constitution of India commenced on 26 January 1950, and changed over the period of time, and even economy changed. So the economic situation changed from 1950 onwards. Every decade it keep on changing. Now we have a liberalization, privatization, and what I am talking about is LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization after 1991. So everything is changing almost at the societal level, whether we can take the economic perspective, political perspective, or any other perspective. So it keep on changing. So beside that, the constitution explained everything, how the country has to be organized, okay, and how it has to function. Let's suppose in the Constitution of India, the three wings are amply differentiated: executive, judiciary and the legislature. Now the work of the legislature is to enact law, that is the primary work, and the work of the judiciary is to pronounce the decision according to the constitution, according to the existing law, and according to the changing scenario in and around. And whatever left after the work of the legislature and judiciary is the work of executive. Now we will later on discuss that part, but the functions and the powers of the president, prime minister, council of minister, even the legislature, you can say the parliament, Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha is amply clearly defined, everything is enumerated there. Now, so the constitution of any country always gives idea about how the country has been organized, how the different functionaries, constitutional functionaries are actually functioning, what are their rights, what are their immunities, everything is clearly defined. So what are the sovereign power of the government? So whenever we are talking about the sovereign power, it means the power to enact law. Whenever we are talking about the sovereignty, it means in the inner sphere or in the outer sphere, the government is free to enact law, policy, government is free to decide which kind of relationship it used to have with the other country at the bilateral forum or at the multilateral forum. Now, so the next one. After that, we are going to discuss about what is the written constitution and what is unwritten constitution. What is written constitution and what is unwritten constitution. But moving further, let me clarify one thing, whether it is a written constitution or unwritten constitution, both are written. So do not go by the meaning in the literal sense. So what is the basic difference between the written and unwritten constitution? Whenever we are saying the written constitution, it means it is codified, means it is properly arranged, systematically arranged. And whenever we are saying unwritten constitution, it is not codified or not systematically arranged. So take the example of our constitution, and it has a different parts, right from part 1 to part 22, and so new one is inserted in a proper place. Now I am giving you one analogy to understand what is the difference between the written and unwritten constitution. So written constitution is like a notebook meant for a specific subject. Let's suppose you have a notebooks related to the polity, related to the IR, related to the governance, related to the geography, related to the economics, related to the disaster management, environment and ecology. So one separate copy for every subject, okay, that is the written constitution. But in an unwritten constitution, it is somewhat like a rough copy. In the first few pages you write polity, then you write governance, then you write economics, then you write disaster management, again you come to the polity, again you come to the economics, again you come to the internal security. So unwritten constitution is that you keep on adding the thing irrespective of the subject you are dealing with. But here in the written constitution, there is a proper place. Let's suppose take the example of Indian constitution. So in the part second we have a citizenship, okay. Part third related to the fundamental right, part 4 is related to directive principle of state policy, and part 5 is related to the union, okay, got that. So we have a proper place for the proper topic in the written constitution. In an unwritten constitution it is somewhat haphazard, okay, you keep on adding the things now. So here again you have to understand, once we say written constitution, it is constitution is the supreme, constitution is the supreme. So just wait for a while. Now in a written constitution, constitution is supreme, it means that everything has to function according to this supreme law, that is the constitution. But in an unwritten constitution we have parliament supreme. So whatever enacted by the parliament of that particular country, it is going to be the supreme. So as far as the written constitution is concerned, India has a written constitution, USA has a written constitution. As far as unwritten constitution is concerned, United Kingdom and New Zealand used to have an unwritten constitution. So I suppose you are able to understand what is the difference between written and unwritten constitution. So again, once you take the written constitution, it is enacted by constituent assembly. Now constituent assembly is a one time affair, it is constituted for the purpose of enacting constitution. Once that purpose is fulfilled, it is going to be dissolved. That is the case of our country also. So on the 26th November 1949 it has been adopted, and ultimately it commenced on the 26th January 1950. So but here in the unwritten constitution, parliament is supreme. So evolved constitution, it does not come in a particular point of time, but evolved for a time period and is still evolving. So if here the supreme law is enacted by the constitution, here parliament used to enact constitution, and it is not once a while affair, it keep on going. And now what is the difference here? Here the constituent assembly is a one time affair for the specific purpose. Here parliament is not only for a specific purpose, it has a different purpose. Let's take the example of Lok Sabha. Every 5 years we have a new election in India, okay. The same is the case of the United Kingdom, but here the whenever the parliament enacted law, it became the part of the constitution. Now the constituent assembly enacted here the constitution. It is now, once this parliament here in India enact law, it is not going to be the part of the constitution, okay. So here act and the constitution is different, and here any act became a part of the constitution, okay, then and there. So that is the basic difference. Now earlier we have in our constitution preamble, 22 part, 395 article and 8 schedule, and now it's changed to the 12 schedule and more than 450 articles. But in a written constitution the articles remains the same, 395 earlier, even 395 right now. So why I am saying more than 450 articles? So in suppose in article 19 we have a parts, then we add subparts, but article 19 remains the same there, okay. So total number of articles remain same, that is 395, but we keep on adding parts and subparts there, and once you start adding that, the number of articles becomes more than 450. Try to understand, okay. But ultimately you will not find article number 396 in our constitution, because altogether we have 395 articles earlier also, even right now also. Only the subparts and sub clause has been added time and again by amending the constitution. I suppose this point is clear to all of you. Okay. So what are the latest constitutional amendment act? Let's take the example of 101 constitutional amendment act, and it is related to the GST, okay, goods and services tax. It is related to GST, goods and services tax, and it was enacted in 2016. So what is written here? 101 constitutional amendment act and 122 constitutional amendment bill. So what is the basic difference between the bill and the act? Okay, so once the bill is passed by Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha, and once it is presented before the President of India, and the President of India gives his assent, and once the assent or signature in a general parlance we can say, that bill get the assent, became act. Okay, so every bill is not going to be become act. Okay, so we have a more number of bill and less number of act. That is the basic difference you have to understand. So in 2016 the GST has been passed, and the article 246A, 269A, 279A has been inserted. Now again I am giving you one finer imprint here. So if any article contains any alphabet in a capital, it is amendment, and if it contains any article which has a small alphabet, it is from the original constitution. And in the 101 constitutional amendment act, okay, even the 7th schedule has been changed there, because as far as the GST is concerned, now it is imposed by the central government, but certainly the state government had foregone their right to impose taxes at the state level. So certainly it has to be some compensation from the central government to the state government. That is altogether different issue. Okay, but certainly there is a requirement of changing the union list and state list. Okay, and now next one is the 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, that is 123rd Constitutional Amendment Bill, provide constitutional status for the National Commission for Backward Classes. Earlier this National Commission for Backward Classes used to be the statutory body. Statutory body means it has been enacted by the act, okay, and now it is in the constitution itself. So what is the basic difference? Once it is an act, it can be changed through the simple majority. Later on I am going to discuss that simple majority, that means 50% plus 1% and voting. But once it became a part of constitution, if there is a requirement of amending it under article 360, it requires a 2/3 of the members vote present and voting. So 50% plus 1 and around 67%, okay, it makes a huge difference there. So once amendment under article 368, certainly it has a provision which is not very easy to manage now. So that was the basic difference, and it inserted the article 338B, 342 and 366 has been amended now. So next is the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act and 124th Constitutional Amendment Bill. So number related to the bill is always going to be the greater in comparison to the number related to the Amendment Act, okay, and the reason I had already told you. So it is related to the 10% reservation for the economically backward upper caste, and it has amended the article 16.4 and 16.4, and it has been changed by 16.6, okay, and another 15.6 was added there, and it provides the reservation in the educational institution and side by side the government job, okay, 10% reservation was given there. Now through this graphics you will able to understand what is the written and unwritten constitution. let's take in the constitution we have a different parts, and in a different parts we have a different chapters. Okay, in the part 5 we have a different chapter. Chapter first is related to the executive. It is related to the executive, that is from the article 52 to 78, and the chapter second is related to the parliament, that is from 79 to 122, and chapter third is related to the legislative power of the president, the power of the president related to the issue of the ordinance, that is given in the chapter third. And once you go to the chapter 4, we have a judiciary from article 124 to 147, that is the Supreme Court we are talking about, and at last in the chapter 5 we have a CAG, that is a Comptroller and Auditor General from article 148 to 151. So that is the difference you have to understand. In the constitution we have a parts, okay, in the constitution we have a parts, in a parts we have a different chapter, in a chapter we have a different articles, and in articles we have a clause, and from clause we have a sub clause. Okay, take the example of the part third of the constitution. We have article 19, and article 19 have a clause 19(1) and sub clause 19(1)(a), and it is related to the freedom of speech and expression. So now the schedule, you have to understand what is a schedule, by the way. Suppose something related to the parliament has been inserted. Okay, so as far as the municipalities is concerned, there are 18 subjects, and as far as the panchayats are concerned, there are 29 subjects. Okay, so if in between the articles, if we write down all the subjects, certainly it is going to break the flow. So this schedule is something like a appendix which is added later in the last, and there used to be the reference, it is a list of something. Now in the beginning of our constitution we used to have 8 schedule, and right now we have a 12th schedule. So we will talk about the 9th schedule, 10th schedule, 11th schedule and 12th schedule. So 9th schedule was added in 1951, okay, under the first Constitutional Amendment Act, and it protects certain laws from the judicial review. Okay, so it keeps some law, okay, outside the purview of the judicial review. So next is the 10th schedule, that is the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1985. It is related to anti-defection law. Right now, some time back it was quite in news in Rajasthan, as you know. Okay, so 11th schedule, that is the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1992, that is the panchayat system, local self government in the rural areas, and the 12th schedule, that is the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992, okay, and it is related to the municipalities. So earlier it was 8, right now we have a 12th schedule. Okay, so earlier we have a 22 parts, okay, and how it keep on changing. So through the 77th Constitutional Amendment Act 1956, it has repealed the part 7. So part 7 is related to the part A, related to the larger estate, part B, that was the classification there at that time, larger princely estate, part C, a smaller estate. Certainly we will discuss all these things once we go through the article 1 to 4, and we will talk about the reorganization of this of estate. In that section we are going to discuss about this in a details, by the way, but right now you have to understand, through this 7th Constitutional Amendment Act 1956, the part 7 and the part 8 part 7th and part 9 has been repealed, and even it is related to the part D. So A, B, C and D, and it is related to Andaman and Nicobar. So earlier we have 22 parts, so these two parts were repealed. So 7th Constitutional Amendment Act we have 20 parts remains, and again the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act at the time of Indira Gandhi added 2 parts, that is a part 4A, and it deals with the fundamental duties. As you know, right now we have 11 fundamental duties, but at that time there used to be 10 fundamental duties. Again the part 14A, it deals with the tribunal. So earlier it was 22, 2 parts were repealed, okay, in the beginning 1956 at the time of Jawaharlal Nehru. Later on again through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, also known as the mini constitution, because so many changes has been done at that time, and again 2 parts were inserted and it becomes the 22 parts. Okay. Now that is the situation right now. So I think you are able to understand what is the basic difference between the written constitution and unwritten constitution. Written constitution is an organized one and unwritten constitution is not organized. In a written constitution, constitution is supreme. In unwritten constitution, we have parliament which is supreme, and written constitution is written by the Constituent Assembly, as you know, that is the one time affair, and unwritten constitution, whatever law is enacted by parliament of that unwritten constitution is became the part of constitution itself. So act becomes the part. Now we have a second classification, and second classification is related to the rigid constitution and flexible constitution. As the name says, rigid constitution is a procedure to change. Procedure to change the amendment is a bit difficult here. So in the case of written constitution, as I told you earlier, under article 368 we require two-thirds of the members vote present and voting. But in the case of unwritten constitution, it is very easy to change. But as far as Indian constitution is concerned, it is a admixture of both flexible and the rigidity. Okay, it is in between somewhere. But to understand what is flexibility and what is rigidity, you have to understand the different types of majority. So let's finish this part at first. What is the majority? Then we will come again what is the rigid constitution and what is the flexible constitution, and how Indian constitution is a admixture of rigid and flexible one. So let's see different types of majority. So absolute majority, as the name say, okay, it is a absolute in this sense that we required 50% plus 1 vote of the total strength, whether members are present or not present, whether there is any kind of vacancy, it hardly matter. What we are looking for is 50% plus 1 vote of the total strength. Let's take the example of the Lok Sabha. We have a 545 member, 50% plus 1, it comes to around 273 now. So next one is the effective majority. What is the effective majority, by the way? Okay, so you have to understand there is a difference between the vacancy and the absence. Okay, let's suppose in any class we have a 50 students, 5 students didn't came today, so after the absence we have a 45 students here. Okay, let's suppose we have a total strength of 50 students in the class, but there is a enrollment of only 40 students, so there is a vacancy of 10, and out of these 40, if 5 is not coming, so it becomes 35, that is after the absence, by the way. So you have to understand what is vacancy and what is absentee. Now, so when we are talking about the effective majority, it means from total strength we are deducting the vacant seat. Okay, so 50% of this is known as the effective majority. So at first you have to understand what is the effective strength. Total strength minus vacant seat listen carefully, not the absent seat. Total strength minus vacant seat is a effective strength, and 50% plus 1 of that effective strength is a effective majority. So total strength, let's take the example of Rajya Sabha, total strength 245, okay, so vacancy is 45, so effective strength is 200, and 50% plus 1 of that is 101, that is the effective majority. So where we require effective majority? So removal of the vice president in the Rajya Sabha requires the effective majority. Removal of the speaker and deputy speaker of the Lok Sabha in the state legislative assembly requires the effective majority. So a speaker and deputy speaker either of the Lok Sabha or the Vidhan Sabha at the state level requires the effective majority. Now next comes the simple majority. As the name suggests, it is simple, it is very easy to get, and 50% of the person present and voting plus 1 is the simple majority. Take the example of simple majority. So 545 members, 45 suppose absent, and out of these 40 after detecting this 45, what comes is a 500, and suppose 100 not voted there, okay, 100 members were present at that time but didn't take part in the voting process. So ultimately it is 400, so 50% of the 400 is 200 plus 1, that is the 201, okay. So this is very easy to manage. Now so any ordinary bill requires under Article 107 requires simple majority. Even the money bill under Article 110 requires simple majority. Financial bill under Article 117 is required to have a simple majority. Suppose the no confidence motion was moved against the government, and even the confidence motion, censure motion, adjournment motion, all these required to have a simple majority. Even the removal of vice president in the Lok Sabha requires the simple majority. Removal of the vice president in the Rajya Sabha requires the effective majority, but in the Lok Sabha it requires the simple majority. So even to declare the financial emergency under Article 360, it requires simple majority. Once the state emergency, or in a popular language president rule, is imposed under Article 356, it requires the simple majority. Next one is the election of the speaker, deputy speaker of the Lok Sabha or the state legislative assembly requires the simple majority. So election of the speaker, deputy speaker of Lok Sabha and legislative assembly requires simple majority, but removal requires the effective majority. That is the big difference you have to remember. Now so next one is the constitutional amendment bill under Article 368, which requires ratification of the state legislature. Certainly we are going to discuss this one later on, okay, in details. So if any constitutional amendment bill which requires the ratification by the Vidhan Sabha of any state, certainly we require to have ratification by the 50% plus 1 Vidhan Sabha, that is more than 50% Vidhan Sabhas, by the way, and it requires only the simple majority, nothing else. Now so after this absolute majority, okay, effective majority, simple majority, comes the special majority. As the name suggests, it is a special